Denver Broncos general manager George Paton said he'd be casting a wide net for the next Broncos head coach. Well, there's 9 candidates that have been selected so far for an interview request with the team. Which coach could be the next Sean McVay? Which coach might be the next Matt Nagy? Sayre, Bedinger, myself, we give you our thoughts on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked on NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked on Network and 9 News. Thank you for making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day. You can get this podcast free and available everywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube, so hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and don't forget to hit that thumbs up button as you're watching here on YouTube, wherever you're at, all across Broncos country. Sayre, my friend, hey, it's great to see you, my friend. Literally shortly after we recorded yesterday's podcast, we get the first notification about an interview request with Patriots linebacker coach Jerod Mayo. So now, look, there is a wide net. George Paton going all in as the Broncos look for the next head coach, turning over every stone, which is something I think fans will appreciate. We got a lot to break down, so we're going to talk about the offensive coaches the Broncos have requested to interview. We're going to talk about the defensive coaches, and then a little bit later on, as the show progresses, we're going to go through and talk about maybe which future players, futures contracts, or special teams, or practice squad players could make an impact in 2022 for the team. Sayre, great to see you, my friend. Let's start things off here. First off, the Broncos have requested permission to interview one of the Philadelphia Eagles' key defensive coaches, and that's Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon, as they're in the playoffs right now. Obviously, that'll probably happen after they're eliminated, whenever that may be. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Gannon as a potential head coaching possibility. Now, keep in mind, Broncos country, George Paton, one thing he did say, he wants leadership as the top priority. So something to keep in mind as we're going through these candidates the Broncos have interviewed.
Definitely. And leadership being the top priority. I think obviously a lot of that stuff you're going to only find, and this is something that I do, this is something that a number of people do. You can kind of search these guys' names on YouTube and just kind of see how they operate, if they have like a mic'd up at the team's practice or whatever. I haven't got to look at much from Jonathan Gannon, but obviously a very highly respected guy, right? I mean, and he's worked with George Paton before, spent 4 years with the Minnesota Vikings as an assistant DBs coach, then became the full-time DBs coach with the Colts. He's also been a scout in the past, so I feel like he and George Paton are going to speak the same language there. And obviously this year with the Philadelphia Eagles, his first year as a defensive coordinator, if you look up the statistics, they might not blow you away, but the Eagles had the number 1 defense in the NFL, Cody, from week 8 to the end of the season. He did a great job of really turning things around for that unit and getting them into the playoffs. And they only lost that last game of the season. They're resting starters because they knew they were making the playoffs. So that's the only reason why they really didn't compete against the Cowboys in that season finale. I think Jonathan Gannon, he's a guy whose name has come up quite a bit, but a guy whose name I think would be surprising to pretty much everybody is Detroit Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. I'm surprised to see him on the list. I don't know about you.
Well, yeah, and I think the first notion too, and I think this is the mistake that a lot of fans make when they hear about players or guys or scouts, whoever may be, interviewing for a potential coaching job, they associate that team's success with the candidate. And I think that's a very dangerous line of thinking, and that's not how fans should operate. I'm telling you, don't look into that as one of those reasons. Why? Because Sean McVay came from the Washington football team that wasn't doing very good, ladies and gentlemen. So like I said, you can't judge these candidates based on how the team is performing. It's much bigger than that. It's not as black and white. But the thing about him is it's interesting enough. He's a candidate. He's a former player. He's a scout. He's a former semi-pro general manager, right? I mean, any experience might be good in that thing there, but he's also a defensive backs coach. So he understands the game from a rudimentary level. And I also want to pinpoint here, a lot of people confuse that if a guy coaches DBs, he's never coached any other position, or he doesn't know any other side of the ball. If you're a football coach in the NFL, more than likely you have experience on both the offensive side and the defensive side from your journey, whether you're a graduate assistant, you go up through the college ranks. You have to know the game in order to be able to be a coach at this level here. Regardless of your experience, you have to know a little bit of everything. But he's an interesting one, and he's somebody that Dan Campbell highly recommends. And obviously, look, we've had our love here for Dan Campbell here on the show. He's one of those defensive options that the Broncos are looking into And we'll see here the interview process here for George Paton. But another name that came up that is very popular right now amongst Broncos country, Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn. Obviously, there's been the links, there's been the ties, the Pro Football Talk article that surfaced about George Paton wanting a package deal, essentially, if he was going to go anywhere. Initially, that was from, I think, last year or 2 years ago. But now there's an opportunity where Dan Quinn could become the next head coach for the Denver Broncos.
He could. And I'd say right now, Cody, as this is just the things that we read, the tea leaves that we can read on Twitter and wherever else, it feels like Dan Quinn really is the front runner, so to speak. And I don't think that's a fair thing to be even talking about right now. The interviews haven't happened yet. So I don't even like talking about it like that, but I do see the tea leaves, and I think that everybody can agree. Like, the tea leaves do all add up. Just like maybe back in 2019 they did for Mike Munchak. Remember, he was the favorite to be named the Broncos' next head coach before Vic Fangio got an interview. So, hey, the interviews matter. So I think that that's something that people need to take into account. But at the same time, Dan Quinn, obviously the most qualified, if we can say that, head coach candidate. I mean, obviously he's doing a tremendous job right now with the Dallas Cowboys. But before that, I mean, he did an amazing job with the Seattle Seahawks as a defensive coordinator, and he won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks. I can't remember exactly who they were playing against in that game, but I just remember his defense played really well. And he's obviously, he's been to the Super Bowl as a head coach. He's one of the only guys in this circuit, in this cycle of head coaches, who's been to the Super Bowl as a head coach. That can't be overstated, and I think obviously that's a big thing, a big notch on his belt. And he's the only guy on the Broncos list, Cody, with former head coaching experience in the NFL right now, other than, somebody who might potentially, we'll talk about him in the next segment, but somebody who might get an interview. As of right now, though, of the solidified coaching candidates that the Broncos are reaching out to, he's the only one with head coaching experience in the NFL. And there's another guy who has almost no coaching experience on the opposite end of the spectrum, a Bill Belichick disciple, former first-round draft pick. Talk to us a little bit about Jerod Mayo.
Well, there's the red flag that's popping up in Broncos country's head, right? Oh, Bill Belichick disciple, right? We talked about Brian Flores as maybe one of the guys the Broncos look to bring in. At this point in time, it doesn't appear that they're interested, as he's already got interviews lined up with the Chicago Bears franchise, not Denver. Denver has not reached out to request an interview as of yet while we're recording this podcast. It could happen, though. You just never know here. But for Jerod Mayo, he's a linebacker coach. He's very well-minded defensively. He's one of those names, in my opinion, Sarah, this is just my opinion here, that I think gets interviewed during this head coaching cycle of teams that are looking. He may not be ready to be a head coach just yet. His knowledge of the game is very good, though. However, I feel like this might be more of a little bit of an appeal for George Paton to get a feel as to whether or not he wants to make Jerod Mayo the team's next defensive coordinator. Something to keep an eye on there. That more than likely could be something that we do see here as a realistic option. Outside of that, I don't believe that Jerod Mayo is truly in consideration for the head coaching job. And there's some candidates that we're also going to talk to you about the interview process as to why maybe it's a little bit of a need to get intel by the Broncos organization. We'll tell you what that means coming up here in just a moment, the offensive candidates. But before we do that, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. That's our good friends over there at Built Bar. You know it as the best tasting protein bar on the market, and also the healthiest protein bar that is out there today. Ladies and gentlemen, Built Bar, they have 9 amazing, delicious flavors, including the monthly limited time flavors that they offer at Built.com. So see which flavor that you like. Go with peanut butter brownie if you're like me. And I know that Sayre Bedinger loves the Built Bar Puffs, the marshmallowy context that you take a bite into it. It tastes like you're biting into a chocolate cloud. Check it out today at Built.com. And like I mentioned, the healthiest protein bar. If you need a bit of extra fuel to help you get through your day, Built Bar has you covered. Each bar contains 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. Ladies and gentlemen, that is tremendous value for something that's covered in 100% milk chocolate. Get yours today by going to Built.com. And when you go to checkout, use promo code LOCK15. That's going to get you 15% off your next order at Built.com. Once again, promo code LOCK15 gets you 15% off at Built.com. All right, Sayre, as we open up the second half action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Once again, Broncos country, thank you so much for making this podcast your first listen of the day, whether you listen to your favorite podcasting provider, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, or if you like watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and hit that thumbs up button here on this video so you can stay up to date with all the daily Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage you get from Sayre and I all year long. Going into the offensive side of the ball in terms of the Broncos, 9 interview requests. We went over the defensive candidates so far. Well, there's 5. 5 on the offensive side, Sayre. So I think that makes Broncos country a little optimistic that George Paton, with his wide net that he is casting, that's a great visual right there, a wide net in the water. He's going in to look at the offensive side of the ball because that's probably more than likely where the Broncos need the most help here. But it doesn't mean that an offensive guy will get the job. One of the surprises, Sayre, and I think this is going to, Broncos country, I think for the most part is happy with this. There's an interview request for Chiefs offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. Now, the amount of conversations that we've had back and forth and that we've talked about where the perception is, and when you talk with Chiefs beat writers, he's not really the offensive play caller. We know that to be Andy Reid, but can he take what he learned from Andy Reid? Can he carry it over to a franchise? There's some evident concerns from his time, obviously, at CU, but, this is one of those interview requests that surprised me a little bit. I don't believe it to be a serious consideration for the Broncos head coaching job. I do believe it could be a great way to get intel, kind of how Dave Ziegler for the GM spot last year. I mean, Joe Ellis and everybody when they were looking for that. So I do imagine maybe, just maybe, there will be something there for the Broncos to look at to get some intel on the Kansas City Chiefs operation.
I think you're right on that, and I'm with you, Cody. I don't see Bieniemy as a top candidate for the Broncos. Obviously, he's among the 9, which means that he's getting a shot. He's getting an interview. I don't know what it is that that there's lots of rumors and there's lots of speculation about what it is and why it is that he doesn't have a head coaching job at this point. It just seems so odd that somebody who's had that close of a tie to that good of an offense hasn't gotten a look from any other team up to this point. I don't know why that is, but he does have some experience with George Paton. I mean, they worked together in Minnesota for a handful of years, and Bieniemy, I think, was even there just a year before George Paton got there. So I think obviously that's an interesting one. And like you said, has he been riding Andy Reid's coattails? And why doesn't he have a job already? Why isn't he calling plays? You just wonder all of that stuff. So I think for me, he's an intriguing candidate. Fact that he even is getting an interview based on what, it seemed like John Elway and Matt Russell wanted nothing to do with interviewing him. So I'm fascinated by that. And then you've got, obviously, the Packers QB coach, Luke Getsy. I would say of all the guys on this list, Cody, he may be the number 9 in terms of likelihood of getting the job. But like you said, intel, or maybe with Jerod Mayo, could he be a coordinator candidate?
I think this is a realistic possibility to look at, right? Because I think for George Paton, when you cast a wide net, ladies and gentlemen, you want to get to know everything about everybody, every potential candidate. And often at times, general managers, organizations, when they're conducting these interviews, they get a better idea in their head. Okay, is this person a better coordinator, or do they have the ability to be a head coach? And I think that's the appeal that not many people think about when we hear head coaching search. It's like when you go to a job interview, sometimes you interview for one position, maybe you're not a great fit for that one position, but they have a different position in mind for you. It's the same thing here when it comes to NFL organizations. Now, I think for him, I think the appeal everyone's talking about, and I know Broncos fans have wanted this, a young offensive-minded guy. Now, look, if you have a young offensive-minded coordinator, well, look, you have maybe this Packers guy here, the offense, what they've been able to do has been pretty impressive there. Obviously, when we talk about Luke Getsy, he's also the passing game coordinator for them. So QB coach, passing game coordinator. When you work with Aaron Rodgers, how much of it is Rodgers, right? There's the whole argument between Peyton Manning, Adam Gase. We can all agree that Peyton Manning made Adam Gase who he was. Was the same thing here with Aaron Rodgers and Getsy. Going to be an interesting question, but there's also the appeal that, hey, bringing over a guy like Getsy, maybe if there's a good relationship there with Aaron Rodgers, maybe it makes it easier for Aaron Rodgers to say, all right, Green Bay, hasta la vista, I'm going to Denver. Something to keep an eye on. But I kind of want to keep things in Green Bay here, though, Sayre. Nathaniel Hackett, offensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers, one of the next candidates that the Broncos have formally put in a request for. Now, in your opinion, how are you feeling about this? Because when I look at him, 19 years of coaching experience, very enthusiastic. When we've seen some clips about him, I'm going to let you take it away. Your thoughts on Nathaniel Hackett?
I'm a big fan, Cody. A big fan. And like you can see, I believe beautiful things happen when the Broncos and Packers come together. So we know that there's good vibes already. So shout out to any Packers fan who may be listening to this who remembers that game. But I love Nathaniel Hackett, to be honest with you. And I don't know. I mean, I can't say I sit here and say that I know a ton about him. I've read articles. I've watched videos. The more you read about him, though, the more videos you watch of him. I mean, if you watch the show Ted Lasso on Apple TV, he kind of feels like a real life Ted Lasso. I mean, he's funny, he's engaging, he's high energy. He got the Packers through some dark times in the pandemic when, they're meeting over Zoom, and you read stuff about him and the way that he carried the Zoom meetings even. So to me, that's the kind of guy, and like we've mentioned this is the underlying thing. This has got to be the foundation for any candidate, right? They've got to have leadership qualities. And to be one of the only guys in the world that Aaron Rodgers actually likes, to be somebody that so many people respect, and he did. I mean, he went to the AFC Championship game with Blake Bortles as his offensive or as his quarterback when he was offensive coordinator in Jacksonville. There's a lot of different things that he's done. It's not just like, okay, we talk about Eric Bieniemy riding Andy Reid's coattails, and you could easily say, well, is Nathaniel Hackett just riding Aaron Rodgers' coattails? I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think you see schematically the Packers are doing some really great things to get a lot of different players involved. That could be an entire episode if and when he's hired, of just like all the different things they've done to get guys like Alan Lazard involved in the offense, to get guys like, the tight ends that they have there. They don't have a ton of talent at the skill positions compared to a lot of other elite teams in the league. So for them to do what they've done, it's been a collaborative effort. You see that even with Getsy being the passing games coordinator, quarterbacks coach, former wide receivers coach. And obviously there's the connection to Aaron Rodgers, which everybody's excited about. I don't necessarily think that bringing in Hackett, even if he would bring Getsy with him as the offensive coordinator or whatever he would want to call him, and quarterbacks coach, I don't think there's any guarantee that Rodgers is coming, but I like the idea of getting two guys who are QB centric, who are offense centric, that could work with any type of QB. I've mentioned that on the show before. And another guy, Cody, who fits, the offensive kind of, I don't know if you want to call him a wonder kid, type of description, but Kellen Moore, he's one of the youngest coordinators out there and one of the most successful, to be honest, number one, offense in Dallas. So what do you think of Kellen Moore as a candidate?
It's very interesting, right? Because George Paton, said that they're going to turn over every stone, right? And they want a guy with leadership. Now, I think for Kellen Moore, obviously he's a backup, former NFL quarterback. You always have to factor that in. He's taken reins of that offense. Mike McCarthy really gave up the play calling reins a couple of years ago due to a lot of questions. Kellen Moore has taken over, and obviously it's been a really successful offense with the output that they have with Dak Prescott, the talent, the personnel that they have, the running backs that they have. But the thing is, he only has 3 years of NFL coaching experience, right? So he's very freshly cut on the teeth here. When we talk about NFL coaching, could he be a head coach? Could he lead a locker room? This is where a lot of NFL teams, a lot of ownerships and general managers are skeptical of young candidates that don't have a lot of NFL coaching experience, because you're working with a particular unit. It's different, though, when you're going to manage the day-to-day of an entire team. So I think that they, despite the fact that Kellen Moore's offense has been so good, I think he would have to blow the Broncos away with his interview in order to really be considered for the head coaching job here. I know fans want the exciting offense, but you need the right guy to lead your team. Vic Fangio could lead a defense, but he struggled to lead a team. And I think it's the same kind of offensive balance here. He's a really good offensive mind so far from what we've seen from him, but can he lead a team? It is the question that any NFL GM, they have questions for. But, real quick, want to go to, another portion. We talk about wonder kids, right? Well, let's go to the Sean McVay coaching tree with Rams offensive coordinator Kevin O'Connell, who the Broncos have requested to interview. Everyone's talking about the next McVay. Could this be it?
Yeah, you want to get a piece of that tree, right? Obviously, Sean McVay is a unique breed. He's a unique type of guy. I know you had a tweet about him the other day, Cody. We don't need to get any further about that. But, Sean McVay is a unique type of guy. And he's a fun dude to just watch and listen to. And he's, frankly, when you hear him speak, you can tell he's probably the smartest guy in the room. He's got the craziest memory I've ever seen of an NFL head coach. I don't know how he was kind of unearthed. He came out of nowhere. So if you're talking about a guy like Kevin O'Connell, the one thing that's really intriguing to me is the fact that McVay blocked other teams from trying to get him last year as an offensive coordinator. So the fact that McVay is trying to block teams from getting him, and that to me is a sign. It's a sign to me that you might take him serious as a defensive coordinator or an offensive coach and head coach. And I think defensive coordinator wise, he was drafted in the same draft class, Cody, as Jerod Mayo with the New England Patriots. I was pointed out to me by my good pal Eric. So that the plot kind of thickens there. Maybe that's part of the plan. So, and I don't know if the Broncos are planning on getting any further into the head coaching interviews beyond these 9, but there's obviously rumors about potential of Doug Peterson, and we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, and this is one of the names. The Broncos have not requested an interview with Peterson. He could, though, but as Benjamin Albright has reported, the Broncos have not reached out to him yet, and he doesn't believe that they will. So we'll have to see as he's gotten some other considerations with the Chicago job, with Jacksonville, things like that. I think that for him as well, you go back to it, he's been the only option that's been able to win a Super Bowl, and his offense, you can go through and make the argument that maybe his final days in Philadelphia were riddled with discontent between he and the general manager. I mean, we've seen what's happened there in Philadelphia. It was a little dysfunctional there. Not sure how much of that is on Doug Peterson, but there is that question there that Broncos fans should consider. Well, Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I are going to go a little bit back and forth. The Broncos signed several players to futures contracts. Which potential special teams players from 2021 or practice squad players could eventually make an impact on offense or defense in 2022? We talk about that coming up here in just a moment. For one of the mailbag questions we received from Broncos country, but before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Their friends over there at the Get Upside app, and listeners of Locked On Broncos are making up to 25 cents per gallon of gas every time that they fill up, and all you got to do that is just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use promo code TOUCHDOWN, and you'll get a bonus 25 cents per gallon on your first tank fill up. That's up to 50 cents cash back today. Don't pay full price at the gas pump ever again. Get cash back using Get Upside today. Just download the app for free and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank fill up today. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a month in cash back, and there is no catch. The cash back gets added directly to your account, and you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUCHDOWN. And our good friends over there, betonline.ag, and BetOnline would like to wish all of you a happy new betting year as we continue to march towards the playoffs and beyond. And BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website that you can sign up today at, and you can receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using promo code Locked On to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your sports action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Sayre, one member of Broncos country sent us a question in our mailbag. We're going to answer some mailbag questions all throughout the week here for Locked On Broncos. I thought it was a very good one to kind of build off of as the Broncos signed 6 players to futures contracts. He posed the question to me, which special teams or practice squad players could make an impact on the Broncos offense or defense in 2022? I want to start things off by talking about a fan favorite, a guy that I actually had on the show, didn't get much time on defense outside of several reps, but I want to talk about PJ Locke for a quick moment as one of my guys. We saw him on special teams primarily with everything. Now, there was some time he missed some games. Honestly, I think there was a COVID thing that he was out for a week or two there, but he came back. And towards the end stretch of the season, with all the injuries the Broncos were dealing with, we saw him playing in the nickel and the dime. He also played well in the preseason. He's one of the guys that I'm really excited about. I think Broncos country needs to keep an eye on. Sayre, who are some guys that you have your eye on here as we kind of go through the rapid fire on today's end of Locked On Broncos?
I love that pick. First of all, PJ Locke, he's an intriguing guy for sure. Defensively, for me, Cody, the practice squad guy that I'm, keeping my eye on is going to be Marquise Spencer, the defensive lineman, a 7th-round pick by the Broncos. Some really intriguing athletic traits. I love the fact that the Broncos seem to be really good at developing and utilizing defensive linemen. So we'll kind of see how that continues now that Vic Fangio's out, and we'll see if Bill Kollar sticks around. I like Marquise Spencer defensively, and offensively, I stick in the trenches. I like Drew Himmelman and Zach Johnson on the offensive line. Anytime the Broncos sign guys to futures contracts on the offensive line, they seem to make some kind of appearance at some point. And Drew Himmelman was there. If I recall correctly, Cody, he got the highest signing bonus of any of the undrafted players that they brought in. So obviously the big offensive tackle, he's going to get some consideration next year, I think, to provide some depth on that offensive line. But I know you like PJ Locke defensively. What do you think offensively?
Well, I'm going to stick with the tight end position and running back here. Look, I think for tight end, I think a lot depends. Like this new coaching staff that's going to come in, I'm really intrigued to see whether or not they keep a guy like Eric Saubert, who's been so good. As Vic Fangio has pointed out, has been a tremendous locker room leader, well-liked by everybody, especially the tight ends that are in that group there, which, there's been stories about some other tight ends that used to be on the Broncos that weren't very good leaders, that didn't vibe really well with that room. So we'll see how things go there. But Saubert, well-loved. We'll see if he'll be back. But one guy that did impress in training camp was Sean Byer. So we'll see if he might be in the mix there. Obviously, a guy who can block relatively well for the Broncos, obviously getting in some preseason action, but also as a receiver. I mean, he's made some spectacular catches in training camp. He's made them in his college games. Obviously, some one-handed catches. It's just the pipeline there when we talk about Iowa tight ends. So, Sean Byer, a name to keep an eye on. But I'm also intrigued about Demaria Crockett. And I think a lot depends on what do the Broncos do this offseason. I mean, for example, I think you have to have a multitude of guys. Javonte Williams, we know, is going to be a prominent feature of this offense going forward. Are the Broncos going to bring back Melvin Gordon? If they don't bring back Melvin Gordon, look, there's some things that we saw from Demaria Crockett in preseason that I think that we would like. Obviously, he could be a kick return option for the team as well. But if Javonte Williams becomes the feature guy, you're going to see a lot of Javonte, Mike Boone, but I think Demaria Crockett could still be that RB3 that we see in Denver. And so those are kind of the options right now. And I'm very intrigued to see what kind of goes on. And I think a lot of the questions we have about the roster, Sayre, they'll be answered once the new coaching staff is in place. And obviously, we're going to be awaiting that. It could be in a week. It could be 2 weeks from now. We'll have to see. But Broncos country, Sayre, Bedinger, myself, we have you covered every single day here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. That will wrap up today's episode of the show. Tomorrow, we have you covered. We have some amazing mailbag questions sent in from Broncos country, from a team building standpoint, from a draft outlook, from young quarterback, new coaching staff. How might it change certain personnel decisions that the team makes at wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, running back, and even on the defensive side of the ball? We talk about that and more on tomorrow's episode. Locked On Broncos, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, and also join us here again on YouTube. Locked On Broncos. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. Broncos country, appreciate you as always. Thank you for making Locked On Broncos your first listen today. Sayre Bedinger, myself, we'll see you tomorrow.